Another day, another video about Patrick Kane trade rumors, because yeah, I think we're going to have to get used to this a little bit, especially as the season goes on. Patrick Kane is the new Claude Giroux. He is the new Jakob Chychrun. He is the new Eichel, wherein every team under the sun is connected to this guy, and we've made so many videos talking about the Leafs, the Oilers, the Rangers, and Patrick Kane, Chicago Blackhawks superstar, arguably the best American National Hockey League player of all time, and a guy whose $10.5 million AAV contract is coming to an end in 2023. He's got trade protection, and it's more likely than not that he will get traded at some point in this season's worth of play, whether that's at the trade deadline, before the trade deadline, or maybe sometime way earlier than that. Who really knows? But he most likely will end off 2023 on a playoff team, in the playoffs, hopefully chasing Lord Stanley's Grail for what would be the fourth time in his illustrious career. This is why we've made so many videos connecting him to other teams, and with every new rumor and idea that pops up, it makes for even more conversation fodder. This time we're talking about the Edmonton Oilers' counterpart in Alberta, another team that's been linked to a whole bunch of high-tier forwards in the past. It is none other than the Calgary Flames. Now, the reason we're talking about this specific idea, even though we had talked so much about Edmonton and them really wanting Patrick Kane and how Kane was apparently their plan A, we're visiting the other Albertan team because of a recent segment done on TSN by Craig Button. What Button did was he talked about 4 teams, 2 in the East and 2 in the West, that he feels actually have a legitimate chance at landing the franchise superstar. There are conversations to happen about the other teams, one of them, which is the Rangers, which is probably the one that's been beaten to death the most on this YouTube channel, all things considered. But Button goes out there and lays out the Pittsburgh Penguins as the other Eastern team, and then in the West he talks about the LA Kings as well as Calgary. Because this entire segment was broadcasted on the TV, it makes for a few interesting articles that have been published as a result. Like this one here in the Hockey Writers. This was published by Colton Pankew a few days ago. The Calgary Flames are a top landing spot for Kane, according to Craig Button. Here is the quote from what Button said on the show. "I'm going to start in the West, and I'm going to go with the Calgary Flames. They're a top defensive team. They lost a little bit of offense, and Patrick Kane could fit into a spot on Calgary very nicely." The article then says that this is something that very few, if any, had talked about prior to Button bringing it up, but it has gotten Flames fans very excited since. Adding a player in Kane, whom many consider to be the best American-born player of all time, would not only give this team the top right winger they need, but could potentially give them the most skilled forward their franchise has ever seen. Sorry, Johnny Gaudreau. Sorry, Jerome McGinley, but yeah, I kinda have to agree there. The major difficulty, though, as highlighted in the piece, is the cap hit. The good news, however, is that the Blackhawks have over $6 million in cap space, meaning that they would have no problem whatsoever retaining a good chunk of his deal if they feel the package coming their way is worth the while. Now, there is a conversation to happen about Jonathan Toews as well, because Toews is also making 10.5, and we had seen from other NHL insiders he might actually get traded before Kane, so there might have to be some double retention, salary cap shenanigans, hocus pocus stuff going on here in order for Chicago to make this kind of trade work. But as for the package it will take to acquire Kane, it's safe to say it will be significant. With 92 points in 78 games last season, he remains one of the game's elite point producers. To get the conversation started, the Blackhawks at the very least would require a first-round pick as well as a very good young prospect. The Flames have first-round picks in each of the upcoming 3 drafts, so that shouldn't be an issue. As far as who they and their fanbase would like to offer up as a prospect, names like Adam Ruzicka and Conor Zary would be at the top of that list. Unfortunately, neither of them would be enough unless the Blackhawks management became desperate, which is very unlikely to happen. This is where we go over into the other conversation that I wanted to bring up in this video, the 2 prospects that are highlighted in this article that could be potential trade fodder in some sort of a Kane deal. Instead, it would likely have to be one of Jakob Pelletier or Matthew Coronato. Flames fans won't be thrilled to see that and may even scoff at the idea. After all, both of those players are expected to have very good NHL careers. On top of that, there is a very legitimate chance that Kane would choose to enter free agency once the season ends. Trading a prospect who could very well become a star for a player who may only be around for a few months is certainly a difficult pill to swallow. That said, there are positives that would come in a deal like this as well. The rest of the piece goes over the playoff history and this team's window of opportunity, and there are some other conversations I had seen going around on the Flames subreddit, for example, about how the Flames' window of contention really is kind of in the now, with Kadri, with Huberdeau, with the signings of all these guys, and of course you have Weegar added on too, because the Calgary Flames have built themselves in a way where they're kind of a great team right now. Losing out on the future careers of a Pelletier or a Coronato for a short-term stint of Patrick Kane today does not seem like the worst idea imaginable. Furthermore, you also have yourselves the history of other guys that got sent around as rentals as well. Claude Giroux was sent from Philadelphia to Florida, and guess what? The Flyers got themselves Owen Tippett and a few draft picks as well. If Chicago can make out like bandits and get somebody of that same prospect caliber as well as the draft picks too, they probably would be pretty happy with something like that. This is why, when it comes to these two, Coronato and Pelletier, I do feel like these are the most appropriate names to highlight in this sort of conversation. I'm sorry, but a guy like Connor Zary unfortunately does not have the same pedigree in my mind as a Pelletier or a Coronato does. Take a look at what each of these guys bring to the table. Pelletier was a 2019 first-round pick. He's 21 years old, 26th overall. He's 5'9", 161 as a left-handed left-wing center, but he absolutely dominated the QMJHL, scoring a boatload of points for Moncton and Val-d'Or. Last season in the AHL, he was a beast, getting 62 points in 66 games played, 27 goals, 35 assists. He was half a point a game in the postseason, unfortunately, but still, playing in Stockton, California, you had yourselves Pelletier, who was an absolute superstar. Now he's playing for the Calgary Wranglers, the new AHL team that they have, and he's got 0 points in 2 games, which is kind of uncharacteristic of him, but at the same time, Pelletier is a guy that really does project to being a top 6, very skilled, versatile, offensively capable forward. Meanwhile, you look at Matthew Coronato, a guy taken 2 years later in 2021, 13th overall by the Flames, and last year he wrapped himself up a point-per-game season in the NCAA with the Harvard University Crimson. He got himself 36 points in 34 games. Now, say what you want about the Ivy League and that NCAA division not really being all too great comparative to the Big Ten or Hockey East, etc., but still, Coronato was really good at scoring in the USHL. He had 85 points in 51 games played in his draft season, and really showcased that he had what it takes to take that scoring to the next level in the NCAA. Also, he was over a point per game for Team USA at the World Juniors. There was just so much to like about Coronato, and if everything pans out, he realistically could be a first-line caliber guy that maybe gets upwards of 70 points in an NHL season. We made a Why I Want video about it, by the way, so if any Chicago Blackhawks fans are going out there and thinking, hey, if we get this guy, what is he like? There is a video on the channel explaining his profile and his services, but these two guys are probably the two most valuable, offensively potent prospects in the Calgary Flames system today. Giving up one of these guys alongside of maybe a first, or maybe even 2 firsts, if you really wanted to push it, a first and a second, let's just say instead, a first, a second, and one of a Pelletier or a Coronato for a guy like Patrick Kane. I want you to tell me in the comment section below as to whether or not that kind of deal is one that you would make. If you're a Flames fan, what do you want to do in regards to a Patrick Kane trade? Are you okay with touching the long-term future of a Pelletier or a Coronato and potentially not having that on your team if it means you get this player? If not, what would you do instead? If you don't want to go after Patrick Kane at all, please let me know in the comments if that is your prerogative too. If you're a Chicago Blackhawks fan, let me know in the comments as well what you would think about a package of something like this with a Coronato or a Pelletier and any sort of Calgary draft pick involved here. Is this the offer that you're chomping at the bit to go out there and think about? Because we've seen offers and ideas thrown around there from Edmonton, we've seen New York, we've even seen Buffalo thrown around there, Toronto was a conversation that we had talked about as well, so when it comes to all the Patrick Kane trade ideas that have been thrown out there, what are your thoughts on this Calgary one, and where does it rank in your, let's just say, mental hierarchy of Patrick Kane trade proposals? That kind of makes sense? I don't know, that's a weird thing to say, but let me know in the comments if it does, as well as what your opinions are. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.